Hello, Disney fans. I want you to meet a very special friend of mine here. See if we can get his handsome face in the shot. Yeah. This is my good friend Bucky, my very good friend Bucky. He is a 14-year-old Hackney pony, and he's had quite a life, and he's been mine for a year now. It's been quite a year, hasn't it, bud? Yes, it has. Glad to be mine? Yeah. Glad to have you as my pony, too. Yes. So I'm going to not keep him too long, or he'll get a little bored being on camera. I don't think he quite understands what we're doing. But today I wanted to talk about a horse that looks a lot like Bucky, Black Beauty. Now, Black Beauty's story's been told a lot of times. Oh, yes. Want to eat the hay on the ground? Okay. Come here. I'll let you go in a minute, bud. Yes. But Black Beauty's story has been retold a lot, but recently it's been retold by Disney. And I wanted to give my thoughts on that version of it, as well as introduce you to my friend here. And I'll tell a little bit more about Bucky's life and who he is when I get back home. But for right now, I'll let him go enjoy himself. He and I just finished a good working session, so he's earned a good turnout in the field, as well as some treats. Want a carrot? Bucky. Bucky. You want a carrot? Yeah, we'll get you a carrot and we'll turn you... Oh, yes, say hello to the camera. No, you can't eat that, but you can have some treats. And I will rejoin you at my place where we will talk both about Bucky and about the movie. See you back there. Okay, back at my place. I know it's a little weird going from the recording on the cell phone with Bucky to being back at my place, but holding a laptop and holding a pony would not work so well together. I left down my usual background because I thought this would be kind of appropriate for today. You can see my horse mementos, and I got actually a fleece throw rug that shows Bucky, a picture of my mom and him. The day I rode in Bareback, it's folded up, but that was the day that I first rode in Bareback, so kind of a special memory that I have with him. I promised to share a little bit more about Bucky. Bucky was a lesson pony at a stable where I took lessons for, I want to say it was 3 years before I bought him. A good friend of mine taught me how to drive a carriage, and I thought that's all I was going to be able to ever do with Bucky because he was taught to move a certain way that was uncomfortable to ride. He was taught a lot of things that weren't a good fit for me, and the way he was taught them, there's no other way to describe it except abuse. And so Bucky and I have had quite a journey together, just like Black Beauty had quite a journey. Now, like I said, this story's been retold a lot, and the original intent of it has been lost in quite a few versions. Anna Sewell wrote this book, which was published in 1877, as a way not just to entertain people, but to try to get people to understand what life is like for horses and what it feels like for them when people misuse them.
Understand that horses can feel what they do. Joe knew that I could feel love and sadness, but others thought it was okay to just throw a horse's life away.
Anna Sewell did accomplish her goal of changing things for horses through her book. People who read it got thinking, and things did slowly start to change. And this story gained a lot of fame, not just to teach people, but also as a source of entertainment. Now, like I said, this story's been told 1,000,001 times. There's Western Black Beauties. There's a lot of versions that have absolutely zero connection to the original book except in name. The second half of the Disney version is actually not that bad of a modern update. You can see the parallels to the book if you know what to look for. It's the first half that gets a lot of harsh criticism, and I can see why. It's a bit of a cliche. It's every single horse story out there. Wild Mustang, caught, brought into captivity. They form a bond with a teenager who is troubled because they lost somebody, they have criminal influence in their lives, they have other things forcing them to do something wrong. Parents died, something has messed up a teenager's life. They come out to where the wild Mustang is for some reason, usually because their parents are dead. And the horse and the teenager form a bond because they understand each other. Not a bad story, it's just been told so often. But it is done in a really nice, heartwarming way here. The teenager in this case is Jo Green, who has gone through the loss of both her parents in a car accident. Because of that, she's sent to live with her uncle, John Manley, who is the person who bought Black Beauty after Black Beauty was captured. Now, it's kind of interesting to me that they changed both Beauty and Jo from being boys to girls. And I think the reason for that is horse riding is much more of a woman's, seen much more at least, as a woman's sport than what it used to be. There's an old joke that, years ago, if you had a very calm, well-mannered horse, that was a lady's horse. Nowadays, they call a horse like that a husband horse because it's suitable for the husband of a lady who rides. So it makes sense to have the change, and at first, you can see how the two are going to bond, but at first, typically for the way this kind of story unfolds, Jo wants nothing to do with her uncle's world, only she starts to pay attention to the way he teaches the horses, and she becomes fascinated by it.
On a culture to learn his language. This is about controlling him or forcing him or making him do something he doesn't want to do. You have to find a balance together.
I should say that Jo Green is played by Mackenzie Foy, who is probably, I won't say better known, but her first major starring role was as Renesmee in the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn. But I think her performance in here definitely eclipses that. See what I did there? Twilight Eclipse. If you've read the Twilight series, you get it. But it's really impossible not to like Jo Green, even though she is kind of a stereotype. Well, not a stereotype, but a cliche. Like I said, she's the girl who's lost her parents, troubled past, who forms the connection with the horse that nobody else can form. But she is someone with a lot of common sense, with a lot of heart, with a lot of course, spirit to her. And she has determination to not give up on Beauty. Now, here's something in the movie that doesn't make sense. They make a point that Beauty will be sold possibly for slaughter if she's not able to be trained. This is supposed to be a Mustang or a rescue for horses in general. Why would a rescue save a horse and then just resell them to slaughter? That makes no sense. But in any case, Mr. Gordon, who runs the rescue, says that Beauty has to be trained if she's going to have any kind of a future. Now, in the book, Squire Gordon was Beauty's second owner. Beauty was actually bred by someone named Farmer Gray, who trained Beauty gently and let Beauty know that humans were friends. And Squire Gordon was actually a really good owner to Beauty, and John Manley, who is Joe's uncle in this, was the coachman who took care of Beauty during that part of his life. And Jo Green was a stable boy, if you want to know how it was in the original book, if you haven't read that. But you can see the parallels and where it connects to the book. Now, Jo is determined to train Beauty, and she does so, of course, using their connection.
So, Mr. Gordon says that if you don't get tamed, you're gonna have to go somewhere else. And probably not as nice as a place.
Me a lot of an incredible experience I had with Bucky. The way that Beauty just follows Joe, even though Beauty is a wild horse at this point. No, Bucky was never wild. He was, bred on a farm. He was trained from the time he was young, but his training and his life after he was sold to the place where I met him, there was so much cruelty there. And one time I was working with him after I bought him, and I decided to let him be loose like that just to see what he would do. And he chose to follow me around. I mean, he wasn't loose. He was in an enclosed arena, but still, he could do whatever he wanted. And he wanted to be with me. And a couple weeks after that, I let him loose in a field to graze, and that field connects to the arena. You walk in through a couple doors, and there you are. You just open up the doors, and you can turn the horse loose outside of the arena. Well, I walked into the arena, and Bucky could have stayed out there eating all the grass that he wanted. And instead, he ran after me once he realized I was going into the arena. And for a horse that's been through all that he has, to choose to be with a person over even over eating grass. I mean, if that's not magic, I don't know what is. So, yeah, that little moment, I can't help thinking of my own buddy in that. But now, Beauty is still early in her training. So, what happens next, even though it is magical to watch, I don't recommend hopping on the back of a barely trained horse, bareback, and hoping for the best, no matter how much they like you. But this is shown as Beauty understanding the pain that Joe is in and wanting to run with her, believing it'll help Joe heal. And it's, even though it is incredibly inaccurate, and please do not try this at home, it's still wonderful to watch.
I hated seeing her so upset. When I was sad, I ran as fast as I could. But since Joe couldn't gallop, I had an idea.
There is something really wonderful about riding a horse bareback like that. I've ridden bareback, and you really feel so amazingly connected to the horse, way more so than if you have a saddle. But it takes a lot of balance. It takes a lot of physical ability. It takes a knowledge of riding that Joe does not have yet. So even though it's a wonderful moment, again, please do not try that if you are not an experienced rider. No matter how much the horse loves you, you're probably going to end up falling off. This is the first of many rides that Beauty and Joe have together, and Beauty progresses in her training really well, and she's trained the way a horse should be trained. It shows her gradually introduced to first the saddle pad, then the saddle, getting used to carrying other riders. She's trained slowly, gently, correctly, and things are going really well for her. Unfortunately, there's a new guy helping out at the rescue. He's told to watch the newborn filly and to make sure she stays warm at night. He doesn't know any better than to put an electric heater in the barn and leave it plugged in where there is straw around. Obviously, this is a major fire hazard, and it's up to Joe to save Beauty and the other horses. What Joe does with Beauty here is actually exactly what usually has to be done with horses who are caught in a fire. They feel safer in their own stalls, even though they're burning, than they do being let out. Of course, this isn't true for all horses, but if a horse is used to being stall kept, then they're conditioned to feel like, oh, this is my safe place, even when it's obvious that it's dangerous. A horse who's more pasture kept would probably not feel that way. And if a horse used to be wild like Beauty, this scene probably would have gone a lot differently in real life. This does mirror what happened in the book, though, because the stable boy at the time had to blindfold Beauty to get him to follow out of the barn. Now, while all the horses are saved, thanks to Joe's bravery here, their home is gone. They have no more place to keep the horses, and the rescue has to find somewhere to go with them. Joe begs to be able to keep Beauty, and she's told by Mr. Gordon, okay, but we might have to lease her out in the meantime. Not sell her, but lease her, which they do. The problem is she ends up being leased to the Earl stalls. Not a good place for a horse to be. The Earl stalls are all about how a horse performs. They have to look a certain way. They have to meet a certain show standard, and they will meet that using whatever means necessary.
York, are you never going to get the horse's head up?
I could take it up another degree, Mom, but I'd prefer not to.
Well, do it, please.
The only thing worse than Georgina's kicks was the draw rein. It forced my head down into my chest so I couldn't breathe naturally.
I'm sorry, when I said Earlshaw before, Earlshaw is the name of their estate. The last name of the family is Winthrop, although they're only referred to as the W in Black Beauty because they had such a long name. They just put W with a dash, and they were nobility, and they were as upper crust as this family is in the movie. Now, what they're doing to Beauty here shows how any training device, any type of equipment used for the horse can be harmful if used incorrectly. The draw rein is supposed to teach a horse how to respond to contact on their mouth and how to carry themselves correctly. Beauty's already doing this. What they are doing to her here is forcing her into an unnatural position. And dressage is supposed to be all about natural grace and subtlety in a horse's movements. It's not supposed to be forced at all. In fact, the ideal in dressage is for every movement to look as if it's the horse's own idea. Now, this scene is supposed to parallel the bearing rein in the original book. That was one of Anna Sewell's pet peeves, was the bearing rein. It's a piece of equipment, it's a strap of leather that goes from the back of a horse's head to a lower point down on their harness while they're hitched to a carriage. This is not at all comfortable for them. It holds their heads way back to look stylish. And I'm going to read a brief description of it here that Beauty's friend Ginger gives. This copy of Black Beauty is very special to me. It actually was handed down to me by my mother. I'm just going to read this quick here. You who have never had a bearing rein on don't know what it is, but I can tell you that it is very dreadful. I like to toss my head about and hold it as high as any horse. But fancy now yourself if you tossed your head up high and were obliged to hold it there, and that for hours together, not able to move it at all except with a jerk higher still, your neck aching till you did not know how to bear it. Unfortunately, Bucky has had that done to him to look stylish. It was part of his training as a hackney pony, a show pony. The bearing rein was largely done away with thanks to this book. People began to see how cruel it was. But a lesser version of it exists today as the overcheck, which is basically the same thing, although not reined up as tightly. I know that I'm going to get some comments from other horse people who might watch this saying, oh, the overcheck is a piece of safety equipment. Yes, it is. It can be used to prevent tangles, to prevent accidents, things getting messed up with the reins and harness. But again, this is a good illustration of how things should be used correctly. Any device, any piece of equipment you use with a horse. And it's important to know how to use them and to be knowledgeable about horses. In fact, a major point in the book is that it is just as wicked and cruel to be ignorant as it is to deliberately set out to do cruelty. That both do just as much. Actually, it says in the book, which does most mischief, heaven only knows. Now, one member of the Winthrop family is good. George, who actually becomes a close friend and love interest to Joe. His sister Georgie is an idiot, and she decides to ride Beauty in a steeplechase. Beauty has never seen a jump before. She is not trained for this. Now, this is an error on the movie maker's part. They should have brought this up, that you don't take a horse who's barely been broken to ride, still learning dressage, and take them to jump in a steeplechase. That, for those of you who might not know the term, it's a race over jumps. Bad idea, and it ends in disaster, which was unavoidable, especially after Beauty loses her shoe. Had this been real, bending the leg like that would have been a break that would have resulted in Beauty being put down. Almost certainly. As it is in the movie, they state that it's a miracle that her leg wasn't broken. The worst that happens is her knees are badly scarred from the fall from coming down hard on them. Now, this scene is interesting in the movie because it combines two scenes from the book. The first was Beauty was being ridden by someone who was drunk. He came down hard on both his knees, scarring them for life, and they decided to sell Beauty because they didn't want a scarred horse at their stable. The second scene that this is based on actually happened to Ginger. She was ridden in a steeplechase, and she had not been trained to be physically fit for it. It was basically like taking someone who jogs around the block once in a while and asking them to compete on the Olympic team. And because of that, her airway was so strained that she was never able to breathe properly again. What they call broken winded in those days. Now, the scenario for Beauty, much like in the book, is she's not wanted at Earlshaw anymore. The whole thing is blamed on her being a Mustang, and she's sent away. Joe has been allowed to stay at Earlshaw for this time as the help, and neither she nor Beauty are upset at leaving that place. And Joe thinks this is good. I have enough money saved aside now. I can buy Beauty for myself. Let's get out of here. But John comes and he gives her some very terrible news. They've lost Birtwick Park, or they've lost Birtwick Stables, where they were going to go back to. Instead of being rebuilt after the fire, it's lost completely.
You're my family. You know that, right? That's like I need to save up enough money to find you.
My heart stopped. My legs went numb. I felt like I couldn't even breathe.
This scene is hard for me to watch because I can't help thinking of 3 horses that I loved and had to say goodbye to. I wasn't in a position to buy them at the time, but if I had, I wouldn't have Bucky now, and I can't imagine any other horse or pony in his place. But it is easy to put myself in Joe's place here. And I can't imagine what it would be like to have Bucky taken from me after our bond has grown and what we've been through together. Now, Beauty actually turns out pretty alright here to start with. Of course, she misses Joe terribly. But the person who buys her is actually good to her. He's a ranger, or more of a search and rescue man in the woods. And now this is actually where Beauty being a Mustang comes in handy. It's one of the few points in the movie that doesn't, where her being a Mustang in this version doesn't take away from the story. It's pointed out how she's bred for this kind of work, riding through the mountains, through forest harsh conditions. She's good at this, and she and her new owner Terry have a couple of good years together. I had thought at first that this referenced another character in the book, but I'll get to him later. This doesn't reference him just yet. But after a particularly hard rescue in which Beauty has to save Terry's life, we do get another reference to the book. A kid who is asked to take care of Beauty for the night doesn't know what to do and gives her water while she's hot from work. This will make a horse sick.
Like the freezing river water, the cold air rushed into my lungs. But the man didn't know anything about horses.
It looks like I'm going to be joined by another special guest for this segment. Everyone, I want you to meet Sage. Say hello, Sage. Yes, hi. You can see I've adopted a new kitten, and if you've seen my other videos, you know that my last cat, Dee, joined me in a lot of them. And Sage, I gotta tell you, your predecessor left some pretty big paw prints on my heart that no cat in the world could ever fill, but you know what? That's the way it should be. Nobody will ever fill the paw prints you leave either, and you totally belong here. Her name is special to me because she actually came with that name in the Cherokee culture as well as other pagan cultures, and I'm proud to be partly Cherokee. Sage drives out negativity and cleanses and brings happiness, and Sage has helped to cleanse away a lot of the negativity and the grief from losing Dee. Yeah, you cool girl. Well, anyway, back to the movie. This this scene was actually based on one of the book where Joe didn't know any better than to give Beauty water after he was terribly hot after being ridden at full speed for a long way in order to get a doctor. Now, they want to show Joe in a more positive light here, so I get that they didn't want to make her make that mistake. But it would have been a good learning opportunity for her. And one flaw that I find in this movie, if I want to nitpick, is that they don't really show Joe make enough mistakes at first when learning with horses. If I were redoing this, I would have liked to have seen Joe learn more as she goes on, rather than just be a natural expert with horsemen. It would have been a lot more relatable to anybody who's ever worked with a horse, because we all have to start at the beginning and have a lot to learn. Well, Beauty gets better, but Terry's getting older and has to retire. So he sells Beauty, and Beauty ends up being worked by a cruel farmer for a few years. before being sold to the character that I thought Terry was supposed to represent, and that is Jerry Barker.
A bit more broken up than we want her to be, Jerry?
Johnny picked her out, actually.
She's beautiful underneath. She's just tired, that's all.
You're right. You should never judge a book by its cover.
In this version, Jerry is a carriage driver in New York. In the original, he was a London cabbie. And I know this is a side note, but just on a personal level, I have to say, I've had the privilege to go to London. And I can tell you the cabbies there are really wonderful people. They get a lot of bad slack from people saying, oh yeah, they'll take you the long road to teach you and all kinds of stuff like that. But that was not my experience at all. The cabbies I met were extremely helpful. They know every place you want to go in London. They know the best way to get there. And a lot of them went out of their way to help me when I needed help. So, yeah, just on a personal note, if you ever are in London, a cabbie is your new best friend. They are awesome. Well, anyway, Jerry is an extremely good man in both versions. In fact, in the book, Beauty says he never knew any better man than Jerry Barker was. And Jerry takes extremely good care of Beauty, of course, but not every horse who's either a cab horse in the book version or a carriage horse in the movie version has it so lucky. And sadly, Beauty sees that Ginger has been bought by a carriage driver in New York as well, only she is not well taken care of.
Ginger's once powerful body was just skin and bones. The fire and life in her eyes had been replaced by deep sadness.
If possible, this scene is even more heart-crushing in the book, because Ginger tells Beauty that her life has become so terrible that she actually wishes for death. She can't see any hope. She's been so ill-used that nobody's going to take a chance on getting her healthy again. That was especially true in Victorian times when a horse was just for work, but even in these days when horses can be seen as a pet, a lot of times there just isn't somebody to take on a horse who has a lot of issues, whether physical or mental. And a short time later, in the book, Beauty sees a horse that he only thinks is Ginger. He's pretty sure it is, but he can't be positive. And he actually says he wishes it was Ginger. He hopes it's Ginger, because then he knows that her suffering is over. In the movie version, we learn that Ginger dies later on, and that's when Beauty finally loses her own will to keep fighting, knowing that Ginger is gone and knowing that humans are that cruel that they just don't care what a horse feels. Because even though in both the book and movie, Beauty has known kindness, overall, it's a cruel world as far as a horse is concerned. Well, Beauty's time with Jerry comes to a sad end because in both versions, Jerry becomes ill after taking care of customers in the wintertime, especially since they make him wait and they don't care that he's out there in the cold. In the book version, they're like, oh yeah, the party will be over soon, just keep waiting for us. And the doctors tell Jerry that you gotta give up this line of work if you want to live to be an old man, because your lungs can't take another winter out in the cold like this. So that means that Beauty has to be sold. And this time, Beauty is worse off than ever. This is the lowest point for Beauty in both versions, where she, depending on the version, ends up in the care of cruel cab drivers or cruel carriage drivers in the modern version. And it gets so bad that it's considered time to send Beauty to slaughter, especially after in the movie version, Beauty lays down in despair and brings public attention to what's going on in that stable. The stable owner wants to be rid of Beauty, and probably most of the other horses too. It's kind of a habit. It's intended to sell them for slaughter. because he doesn't want people knowing how bad those horses are taken care of. And they do come for Beauty.
I knew they had come for me. But if it really was the end, I wouldn't make it easy on them. I was a Mustang. Strong and proud and wild. And I would defend myself until my final breath. Joe would have wanted that.
Thankfully for Beauty and every other horse at that stable, the authorities have been looking for the horse that went down in the street. Everybody's talking about that horse. And of course, the stable owner knows that's Beauty, but he's not going to let the authorities know that. One of the people working at that stable lets them know when they call. And Joe, who has apparently been working with the authorities, comes with them. And their reunion is just, it's heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time because it took so long for them to find each other again, but now at last they're back together.
Oh, my beauty. I promised I'd find her. It was really her. My Joe.
Joe is now married to George, or at least they're dating heavily. It's never said for sure whether they're married or not, but you get the idea that they're together. And not only are they together working to save horses, but they have actually rebuilt Birtwick. They've got it running again as a horse sanctuary, and they bring Beauty there. Beauty's reunited not just with Joe, but with her old friend Mary Lakes. And she's going to live the rest of her life with them. Now the book has a happy ending for Beauty too, of course. Beauty is found run down, and he's rescued by Farmer Thorogood and his grandson Willie. The grandson says, "Oh, Grandpa, please take this poor horse and help get him well again. I know you can sell him for more than you paid for him. Please help him get well." And the grandfather agrees, and Beauty's actually sold to some very kind ladies after that, and Joe happens to be the groom for them. Now, most versions of Black Beauty, at least quite a few that I've seen, do have Joe Green or the equivalent character looking for Beauty ever since they're forced apart. In the book, it's just happy coincidence that they happen to end up back together. Overall, I would say this movie does do justice to the book. It shows all the things that a horse can go through, and it does get you thinking about how to make a horse's life easier. For example, the draw rein is focused on here like the bearing rein was in the original, although not quite to that extent. It's still told more of as a story than a learning aid, more than something to get people thinking, but it still does the job. It might start out as your typical Wild Mustang movie, but it doesn't end up that way. And if you're going to bring Black Beauty into the modern day, you could do a lot worse. So even though there are some inaccuracies as far as horse care goes, and although I would do a few things differently, I would give this movie a pretty high rating. Just a few last comments on it. Beauty is voiced by Kate Winslet, who I first heard of as Rose in Titanic. I was pretty excited to see another thing with her in it. I admired her acting abilities, not just because I love that movie, but because I do consider her a very gifted actress. I wanted to say something else about the book, too, that I pointed out when I was talking with my friend Rue, and she said I should probably bring it up, is a little interesting bit of trivia. There are a couple lines that are altered between different versions of the book Black Beauty. I don't know why, and that's unusual because it she the author of the book, Anna Sewell, passed away before she could make any changes to work, before they could consult and say, yeah, let's do a different draft. I wonder if her mother may have had something to do with it, because at the end she was too ill to write. And it was her mother who actually did the physical writing of it, even though it was Anna Sewell who narrated it to her and said, this is what I want you to say. So an interesting question to think about. The book, as I mentioned, has done a lot of good, and it has got things a lot better for horses. In fact, there was a court case I stumbled across that was in the New York Times where somebody accused of abusing horses was actually sentenced to read Black Beauty as part of his punishment. Trying to get him thinking, trying to give a heart to someone who I'm guessing it didn't work on, because if you're that heartless, there probably isn't going to be much that will reach you. But occasionally people do learn. And I think that this is a movie that, even though it does have inaccuracies, people can learn from. And I hope that everybody who watches it, who does know the book, will give it a fair chance. It's got differences, but it's still a good story. And until next time, remember the magic.